Most families run on love. Mine ran on a quiet, high-interest loan that nobody talked about, until last spring at the Grand Pavilion Grill. When the waiter brought out for juicy $120 ribeyes for my sister's kids, my 7-year-old son, Leo, sat staring at his empty napkin. That's when my sister, Beatrice, smirked and slid a dry bread basket toward him, whispering, "The kids' menu here is trash anyway." My father didn't even look up from his plate. He just muttered, "You should have brought him a lunchbox." I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just looked at the waiter, handed him my titanium corporate card, ordered my son the biggest steak in the house, and said 5 words that shattered my family's 30-year gravy train. "The family bank is closed." Nobody understood what I meant. Not yet. My name is Elena Vance. I'm 36 years old, an ER trauma surgeon at Mercy General, and for the last 5 years, I've been the invisible engine running my entire family's lifestyle without a single one of them knowing it, or so I thought, until that dinner peeled back the first layer of a lie I'd been living inside for a decade. Let me back up. That night was supposed to be my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. I'd worked a double shift, still had dried blood on my sneakers from a gunshot wound I'd closed up 4 hours earlier, and I showed up at the Grand Pavilion Grill straight from the hospital because I never missed these dinners. I always thought showing up mattered. I always thought if I just kept showing up, kept giving, eventually someone would notice. Leo sat next to me, swinging his little legs under the table, excited because I'd promised him steak. He loves steak. It's the one luxury I let him have, because most nights it's just the two of us, and whatever I can throw together after a 16-hour shift. Beatrice's kids, Marcus and Chloe, were already halfway through their ribeyes when the waiter came around to Leo. Beatrice didn't even look at me. She just reached over, slid that little wicker bread basket across the table like she was tossing a dog a bone, and said it with a smile so easy it made my skin crawl. "The kids' menu here is trash anyway." I looked at my father. Arthur Vance, 68 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who commands a room just by clearing his throat. He didn't defend Leo. He didn't even flinch. He just kept sawing at his steak and said, "You should have brought him a lunchbox." Something in me went very quiet. Not angry, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a surgeon makes the first incision. I flagged the waiter down myself. "He'll have the same ribeye as the other kids. Actually, make it the 22-ounce. And bring me a separate check for my table." Beatrice's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "A separate check." "Elena, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, B. I'm being accurate. For once." My mother, Diane, who rarely spoke at these dinners, shot me a look I couldn't read, somewhere between fear and warning. She reached for her wine glass instead of for words, like she always did. Here's the thing nobody at that table knew, the thing I'd been too exhausted and too guilty to ever bring up out loud. For 5 years, every single one of these family dinners, the anniversaries, the birthdays, Marcus's little league banquets, Chloe's dance recitals after parties, I had been quietly paying for. Not splitting the bill. Paying the whole thing. I'd call the restaurant ahead, give them my card number, tell them to just bring me the check discreetly at the end so nobody made a fuss. I told myself it was generosity. I told myself I could afford it, that family takes care of family, that my father raised 4 kids on a factory foreman's salary, and deserved to enjoy his retirement. I didn't know yet that family bank wasn't just a phrase I'd coined in my head watching money disappear from every gathering. I didn't know there was an actual ledger with my name on it, tracking every dollar I'd ever spent on this family since I was 14 years old, charging 8% monthly interest like I was a debtor instead of a daughter. The waiter brought the 2 checks. I signed mine without looking at the total. I never do, it's never mattered before. Beatrice's face went tight when she realized I wasn't reaching for the family total the way I always did, the way that had quietly become expected, unspoken, assumed. "Elena," my father said, low and warning, the tone he used when I was 16, and came home 5 minutes past curfew. "What exactly is going on with you? I stood up, helped Leo out of his booster seat, and looked at the four of them, my father, my mother, my sister, her husband Julian, who hadn't said a single word all night because he never does when money comes up, and I said it. The family bank is closed. I didn't explain. I didn't wait for a reaction. I took Leo's hand and walked out into the parking lot, and it wasn't until I was sitting in my car, engine running, hands shaking on the steering wheel, that I let myself cry for the first time in longer than I could remember. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd made my point and we'd all quietly go back to normal in a few weeks, the way families do, papering over the crack instead of looking at what caused it. I had no idea that closing the family bank was about to blow open a vault of secrets that had been buried for 30 years, secrets that would cost me my credit score, nearly cost me my dream house, and reveal that my own father had been keeping a ledger on my life since I was a child. It started 3 weeks later, when I walked into a bank to finalize the mortgage on the house I'd been saving for since Leo was born. The loan officer looked at her screen, then looked back at me, and said the words that would unravel everything. "Ms. Vance, I'm sorry, but with a credit score this low, we can't approve you for this mortgage." "I'm sorry, what?" I said, certain I'd misheard her. The loan officer, a young woman named Priya with kind eyes and an uncomfortable expression, turned her monitor toward me. "Your credit score is 512. There's a repossession flag, 2 collections accounts, and a defaulted auto loan for a 2024 European luxury sedan showing on your report, opened 18 months ago." I stared at the screen like it was written in a language I didn't speak. "That's not possible. I've never bought a car in the last 5 years. I drive a 2019 Honda. The loan is under your name and social security number, Ms. Vance. Opened at Meridian Auto Finance. Current balance owed, $47,300. It's 90 days delinquent." My hands went cold. Not the kind of cold you feel in winter, the kind of cold that comes right before your whole body understands something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. "I need a copy of everything," I said. "Every document tied to that loan." Priya printed it out, and I sat in the parking lot of that bank for 40 minutes, reading a loan application with my name, my social security number, my old apartment address from 6 years ago, and a signature that was almost my signature. Almost. The E curled wrong. I'd know my own handwriting anywhere. I signed consent forms 15 times a shift. I called my attorney, Evelyn Carter, that same afternoon. Evelyn had done my medical malpractice insurance and my will, sharp, unshakable, the kind of lawyer who reads contracts for fun. "Elena, slow down," she said. "Walk me through this from the beginning." I did. And when I got to the part about the anniversary dinner, about Beatrice's European sedan that had shown up in her driveway 18 months ago, a car Julian had bragged about at every family function, calling it a little anniversary gift to ourselves, Evelyn went quiet on the other end of the line. "Elena, I want you to think very carefully. Is there any chance your father or sister ever had access to your personal documents? Old apartment leases, tax returns, anything with your social security number on it?" And that's when it hit me. The storage unit. 2 years ago, when I moved into my current apartment, I didn't have room for 6 boxes of old paperwork, residency records, tax documents, my divorce decree from Leo's father, old insurance forms. I'd asked my dad to hold them in the basement of the house I grew up in, just until I found time to go through them. I never had. I'd forgotten they existed. "My father has boxes of my documents," I told Evelyn. "In his basement." "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into something clinical, careful. "Don't confront anyone yet. I want you to file an identity theft report with the FTC tonight, and I'm going to get you in touch with a financial crimes investigator I trust. His name is Gabriel Ross. Don't say anything to your family until we have documentation. If this is what I think it is, they'll destroy evidence the second they know you're onto them." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with Leo's night light glowing down the hallway, going through every family dinner, every emergency phone call from Beatrice over the years. "Elena, can you just cover this until Julian's bonus comes in? I'll pay you back money that never once came back. I'd stopped keeping count because counting felt petty. Ungenerous. Not who I wanted to be. I realized sitting there that not keeping count was exactly what they'd been counting on. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house under the excuse of picking up some old boxes I finally have room for. My mother let me into the basement without a second thought. She was upstairs watching her shows, and my father was at his Tuesday golf game, which I'd confirmed before I came. The boxes were exactly where I'd left them. But behind them, tucked on a high shelf under a folded moving blanket, was something I hadn't left there. A black leather ledger, cracked with age, rubber-banded shut. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The first page had my name at the top and a date, the year I turned 14. Braces, $2,400. School trip to Washington, $380. Winter coat, $95. Every single item had a second column beside it. Interest. 8%, compounding monthly, starting from the date of purchase and running. I did the math right there on the basement floor for 22 years. I flipped forward. College tuition, my portion after scholarships. My wedding, years ago, before the divorce, Arthur had contributed $12,000, and it was logged with interest that had, by now, ballooned to over $40,000. My medical school loan co-signature. Every hospital bonus check I'd ever mentioned at a family dinner, every raise, cross-referenced with a corresponding contribution expected entry beside Beatrice's name, money that, I now understood, had never actually gone to Beatrice. It had gone somewhere else. And then I found the page that made me sit down hard on the cold concrete floor. Leo Vance, birthday fund drawdowns. My son. My 7-year-old son had his own line in this ledger. Every birthday gift my parents had ever given him, the bicycle, the video game console, the $50 bills tucked into cards, logged as a debit against my account, with interest, as if love itself had been issued to him on credit. I heard the garage door open upstairs. My father was home early. I closed the ledger, slid it inside my jacket, and by the time Arthur walked down into the basement to see why I was taking so long, I was standing there holding a box of old tax documents, my face arranged into something calm, something that gave away absolutely nothing. Find everything you needed, he asked, watching me a beat too long. I found exactly what I needed, Dad, I said. I had no idea, walking up those basement stairs with that ledger pressed against my ribs, that within the week, Officer Gabriel Ross would trace the shell company behind that auto loan directly back to my father's name, and that the real architect of this decade-long scheme wasn't going to be the sister I'd suspected all along. Officer Gabriel Ross had the calm, methodical energy of a man who'd spent 15 years untangling other people's lies for a living. We met at a diner 2 blocks from Mercy General, because I only had 40 minutes between shifts, and this felt too urgent to wait for a proper office appointment. He slid a manila folder across the table. I ran the shell company tied to your auto loan. It's called Vance Family Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware 4 years ago. Registered agent's a service that hides ownership behind a P.O. box, standard move, if you don't want your name easily searchable. And the actual owner. Took some digging, but yes. I found the original formation documents through a records request. 2 signatories. He turned the page toward me. Arthur Vance. And Beatrice Vance Sterling. I stared at my father's signature, inked in his tight, deliberate handwriting, right below a line that read managing member. There's more, Gabriel said. This LLC isn't just tied to your car loan. It's the entity that received 3 tax refund direct deposits, yours, over the last 4 years. Someone changed the routing number on file with the IRS. And there's a hospital bonus disbursement from 18 months ago, the one tied to your chief of trauma commendation. $18,000. It didn't go to your checking account, Dr. Vance. It went to this LLC. I remembered that bonus. I remembered mentioning it once at Sunday dinner, proud, exhausted, wanting my father to be proud of me too. He'd nodded and said, "That's good, that's real good, Elena," and changed the subject to Beatrice's kitchen renovation. "Why," I said quietly, "would my father need to steal from me? He has a pension. Mom has her teacher's retirement. They're not struggling." Gabriel closed the folder. "In my experience, ma'am, it's rarely about need. It's about control. Somebody builds a system where one family member is the resource and everybody else is the beneficiary, and once that system works, they protect it. Doesn't matter how much money's already there. The system becomes the point." I thought about the ledger. About Leo's birthday gifts logged as debts. About 35 years of being the responsible one, the strong one, the one who didn't need to be checked on because I could handle anything, including, apparently, handling being quietly robbed. I met Evelyn Carter that evening with the ledger, the LLC documents, and everything Gabriel had compiled. She read for nearly an hour without speaking, occasionally making a small sound in her throat that I'd learned meant she'd found something significant. "Elena, this isn't a messy family situation anymore. This is felony identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery at minimum. The car loan alone is enough to press criminal charges against your father and sister jointly." She looked up. "But you called me first instead of the police. So tell me what you actually want here. Do you want justice or do you want leverage?" "I want them to never be able to touch a dollar of mine again. I want my son's name out of whatever sick accounting system my father's been running since I was 14. And I want my house." "Then here's what we do." Evelyn started writing. 1. We file the identity theft affidavit and dispute every fraudulent account, which starts repairing your credit immediately once the bank confirms fraud. 2. We file a civil suit against Vance Family Holdings LLC for the recovered funds, the tax refunds, the bonus, everything traceable. 3. And this is the part that actually protects your future, we move every asset you own into an irrevocable trust with Leo as sole beneficiary, so nothing you earn going forward is ever reachable by anyone claiming family has a right to it. And 4. Since your father used the property title as informal collateral discussions with that LLC, I found a reference to it in the formation paperwork, we file a lien against the family home to secure repayment. Not to take the house. To make sure they can't sell it, refinance it, or hide behind it while you're owed $42,000 documented dollars. I signed everything that night. 3 days later, my credit score jumped back into the 700s once the fraud disputes were confirmed. Mortgage approval came through for Cliffside Cottage the following week, the house I'd been saving toward for 3 years, a small blue 2-story place with a porch that looked out over the water, the place I'd pictured Leo doing homework at the kitchen table every afternoon. I didn't tell my family any of this. I let the silence sit. I stopped answering Beatrice's calls, stopped attending Sunday dinners, and for the first time in years, my Saturdays belonged only to Leo, pancakes, the park, no invoices hiding behind hugs. The silence didn't last. 2.5 weeks after I signed the trust paperwork, Julian Sterling's construction firm filed for bankruptcy, a business that, according to the filing, had been propped up for over a year by family loans that were never on any bank's books. With his credit destroyed and business capital gone, the European sedan payments stopped entirely, triggering the repossession that had already flagged my report. Beatrice, apparently, hadn't known any of it was happening under her name and mine simultaneously until the repo company called her house. That's when the calls started. Voicemail after voicemail, Beatrice's voice climbing from confused to furious to something closer to panic. "Elena, what did you do? Someone from a bank keeps calling about a lien on Dad's house. Call me back. Elena, I know you're there. This is insane, we're family, you can't do this to us." Then, finally, a call from my father himself, the first time he'd phoned me directly in over a year. "Elena," he said, and his voice had none of the golf course warmth I remembered. "You and I need to talk. In person. Tomorrow. At your hospital, if that's what it takes." "I'll be in the surgical wing conference room at noon," I said. "Bring whatever lawyer you think can undo 4 years of documented fraud." I hung up before he could answer, and for the first time since that basement floor, I didn't feel afraid of what was coming. I felt ready. I had no idea that Arthur and Beatrice weren't coming to apologize. They were coming to make one last attempt to convince me that pressing charges against my own father would destroy the family forever, and that the person who'd ultimately break that lie wide open, in front of everyone, would be my mother. They arrived at noon exactly, my father in his good blazer like he was walking into a boardroom he still believed he controlled, Beatrice a step behind him with red-rimmed eyes, and her arms crossed tight against her chest. I'd asked Evelyn to be there in person, seated quietly at the end of the conference table with a folder of her own. Officer Ross wasn't present, this part wasn't his to handle yet, but everything he'd found sat inside a second folder in front of me. My father didn't sit down. He stood at the head of the table like he still had the right to. Elena, this has gone far enough. A lien on our home. Freezing accounts. Do you understand what you're doing to your mother? She hasn't slept in a week. I understand exactly what I'm doing, I said. I'm doing to this family what this family has been doing to me since I was 14 years old. Beatrice's voice cracked in. You think a car loan makes us criminals? We're your family, Elena. Families don't sue each other. Families don't call the police on their own father. Families, I said, sliding the black leather ledger across the table so it stopped directly in front of my father, don't keep a compounding interest ledger on their daughter's childhood. Families don't put a 7-year-old's birthday presents on a debt sheet. The color left Arthur's face. Beatrice's eyes dropped to the ledger like she was seeing a ghost. You didn't treat me like family, I said, and my voice stayed level, steady, the same voice I use when a patient's vitals are crashing and panic would kill them faster than the injury. You treated me like an ATM, ATMs require a card. And mine just got destroyed. Elena, Arthur started. I'm not finished. I opened Evelyn's folder and laid out the LLC formation documents, the tax refund redirections, the $18,000 bonus that never reached my account. Vance Family Holdings. Your signature. Beatrice's signature. For years of my earnings routed through a shell company neither of you thought I'd ever find. For the first time, Beatrice looked at her father instead of me. Dad. What is she talking about? And that's when my mother's voice came from the doorway. None of us had heard her come in. She's talking about the truth, Beatrice, Diane Vance said, stepping into the room, her hands trembling around a folder of her own, one I hadn't even known existed. I should have shown her this years ago. She said it in front of me. Bank statements, going back a decade, that Diane had quietly kept copies of, every transfer, every withdrawal, all in Arthur's handwriting on the memo lines. I knew about the ledger, she said, and her voice broke on the word ledger. I found it 6 years ago. I told him to burn it. He told me it was insurance, in case one of you ever tried to walk away from this family. I should have told you then, Elena. I've carried that instead, and it's cost you everything. I'm done carrying it. Arthur's jaw tightened. Diane, don't. I already did, she said quietly. I gave Officer Ross a copy this morning. The room went silent in a way that felt like the floor had shifted under all of us. Beatrice sat down slowly, her anger draining into something closer to disbelief, staring at her father like she was meeting him for the first time. You used both of us, she said to him, barely above a whisper. You used me to sign papers I didn't understand, and you used her money to fund it. Arthur didn't deny it. He just stood there, smaller somehow than he'd looked walking in. I closed the folder. Here's what happens now. The lien on the house stays until the LLC repays every documented $42,000, plus what Officer Ross traces from the bonus and refunds. Beatrice, the car has already been repossessed, that's between you and the finance company now, not me. I'm not pressing criminal charges today. Not because I forgive this. Because Leo has a right to know his mother chose accountability over cruelty, even when cruelty was on the table. But if either of you ever contacts me asking for money again, a loan, an emergency, a gift, I will hand everything in this room to the district attorney within the hour. And the family? Beatrice asked, quiet now. What happens to us? That's not something I'm deciding for you, I said, standing up. I decided what happens to me. The rest is yours to figure out. I walked out of that conference room, and didn't look back. The following spring, police repossessed what was left of Julian's business assets to cover the remaining fraud judgment, and Beatrice moved with her kids into a small rental across town. The first time, she told my mother, that she'd ever had to budget for anything herself. My father sold 2 rental properties to satisfy the lien. I heard he took up golf less. I didn't ask. Cliffside Cottage closed in June. Leo picked his own room, the one with the window facing the water, and on our first night there, we ate pizza on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet, and he fell asleep on my shoulder before 8 o'clock, exhausted from carrying boxes he insisted on helping with. 6 months later, Leo and I went back to the Grand Pavilion Grill, his choice, not mine. He wanted the ribeye again, the big one. The waiter set the menu in front of him without a second glance, and when the bill came, I paid it without checking the total, the way I used to. But this time it felt different. This time there was no ledger waiting behind it. Order whatever you want, sweetie, I told him, watching him grin over the dessert menu like the whole world was exactly as generous as it should be. In this house, your seat at the table is already fully paid for. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, that was simply true, with no interest, no strings, and nobody keeping score.